Well, good evening. I want to welcome everybody to Our Schools USA's School Board Issue Organizing 101 training. We are so glad to have you this evening to join us to walk through some basics about organizing around school board issues and school boards generally. I'll start by doing a quick introduction. We are Our Schools USA. I'm Christina Gagne. I am a former school board member for the Chino Valley Unified School District in Chino Valley, California. I'm also a children's privacy attorney in private practice, and I will turn it over to Christy to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Christy. I am a former public school teacher, and I am currently a parent of 3 kids in the local public schools here.
Well, again, we're glad for you to join us. Just a couple housekeeping reminders before we get started through the training. First and foremost, we love questions, and so we're very excited to answer questions at the end of the training. We'll be keeping notes throughout, and so if you just want to drop any questions that you may have in the chat, we'll be sure to answer them towards the end of the presentation. Also, we are recording this. We want to make sure we can share it for people that weren't able to join us today and interact, and so just want to notify that we are recording, and that's why we don't have your cameras on or the ability to speak. We just want to make sure we're respecting everyone's privacy as we do this presentation. So over the next hour, we're going to cover a couple of things, a lot of ground to cover for school board issue organizing. The last couple of years have clearly put school boards front and center in the political environment across the United States. And so, there's been more of a need to organize. And so we're going to cover a variety of things, tactics, strategies, and communication tools that you can use to organize around the school board. And Christy and I will be coming at this from a couple different perspectives. Just a little bit about my background. I was in grassroots organizing throughout my college career and afterwards. I had a whole other career before I was a lawyer. I also was the chief information officer for a national political nonprofit for several years. And so I spent much of my time organizing around different issues with high school and college students around higher education throughout the United States. And so a lot of the best practices that I'm going to bring forward are from that perspective. But additionally, I've also been a school board member the last 4 years. I served on the school board from 2018 to 2022. And so I'm going to share my perspective having sat on a dais and having been on a public school board. I was both the vice president and the president of my school board. And so I had a front row seat to what's been going on the last 4 years. Christy, you can share your perspective as well.
I've been on the other side, the person in the audience who is monitoring what's happening in our local school board, attending meetings, speaking, trying to organize around issues that we see arising. As a parent and as an educator, I've been monitoring and being active and engaged locally with what's happening. So my perspective comes from the other side of somebody organizing out right now around current issues we're seeing in local school boards.
Great. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to dive right into our agenda. We got a packed agenda for today, and so we'll try to get through as much of this as possible in the next hour. So we're going to start with finding your issue. That's something that I think is really important to figure out what you're going to organize around, or whether you have to kind of generally organize around what's happening throughout your school district. Next, we'll cover finding your people. It's very important to network and collect friends and supporters around the issues that you care about. Third, we'll cover finding your goals. It's very important to understand sort of what you're trying to organize towards, or if there's a particular resolution or issue that's sort of a one meeting and done thing, how do you get people to go? Finding your message. Messaging today is very important. The cool thing about social media tools is they're readily available. The thing that might not be as cool is you have to make sure your message kind of penetrates through everything that's happening on the internet. And so we'll talk about both on and offline messaging. And then finally, we'll talk about strategies, things that will be effective in terms of helping you organize, as well as helping you reach your target audience. And we will get into that a little more throughout the presentation. So first things first, finding your issue. And I know this might be a no-brainer or seem like a no-brainer. In many local communities, there are a lot of culture war issues that are popping up. And so things like critical race theory, things concerning privatization of public schools. There's a litany of issues that we see in the national news media and the local news media across the United States. But in other places, you might not sort of be able to figure out very clearly what that issue is. And so perhaps you have something sort of environmentally happening in your local public schools, but you're not able really to pinpoint what the solution to that would be, or sort of who you would go to or how you would frame it. And so the first thing that is very important is finding your issue, is what exactly are you trying to affect? What change are you trying to seek? And a couple things that you should ask yourself is, first of all, as you identify what your issue is, and we'll give some examples in just a minute, what do you know about the issue? So if you identify something that you care about, what do you know about it? And I'll give an example from when I was on the school board. Our community, Christy and I both live in the Chino Valley in California. Our community is growing in different areas. The community's been around for over 100 years, and part of our community that used to be mostly agricultural land is now houses. And so where do people want schools? Where there's new houses. And so several years ago, during my first year on the school board, parents wanted a new school opened in those neighborhoods to make sure that the current school wasn't going to become overcrowded. And so the parents identified their issue as, we want a second school open in our neighborhood to make sure that our kids are not going to an overcrowded K-6 school. And so the parents asked themselves first, what do they know about the issue? So what do they know about why a school isn't already there? What would be an impediment to having a school? In our particular case, a bond had passed that was going to pay for a new school. So the parents were asking themselves, well, what's the plan for this new school? What's the timeline? When will it happen? And so similarly, you might have an issue like that that's a little more cut and dry, but what do you know about the issue? The next question you should ask yourself is, who else cares? Sometimes, particularly in public schools, you might have an issue you're very passionate about, but do other people care about it? Is there an issue on a campus that other parents would be concerned about, or administrators or teachers? Is the issue controversial? This is something very new to public schools, probably over the last 3 years, but a lot of the issues that are coming up before public schools and public school boards are controversial. They're very divisive issues. And so it's important to figure out, if you're going to go and rally on one side or another of the issue, what is the controversy around the issue? Who else may come out and be messaging for or against it? Who are your allies? Who can you identify, whether that's school administrators or teachers or members of the school board, people that work in the district office as part of the district staff? Who are your natural allies in this issue, and how can they be helpful to you? And then finally, what does the opposition look like? Unfortunately, again, in our political environment, some of these issues have very passionate views on one side or the other, but you have to understand who the opposition is if you're going to argue for a particular issue or argue for a particular outcome. So a couple tips that we have in terms of finding your issue is, one, you want to start general and narrow it down. And so you might think that there's an issue in the public schools about the curriculum. And so let's say you picked the math curriculum. I'm going to pick a really benign example. Maybe you think there's something that needs to be enhanced in that curriculum. And so that's a very general thing, is, what are we doing to teach math in our public schools locally? So maybe narrow it down. Is there like a particular grade level that you want to focus on, or some sort of part of the curriculum that you'd like to see augmented? So it's really important to sort of start with the big picture and then narrow into what you actually want to see some sort of result on. And you should ask yourself, should we be laser focused? And when you are finding an issue, one of the things that you always need to bear in mind is, if you're more broad, what people will work with you, and if you're more laser focused, what people will work with you, because that might be very different. In many public school communities across the country, there's one issue after another hitting school board agendas every week. And so you might be organizing just a broader coalition that just wants to see your local public schools look a certain way, versus we have this one issue and this one resolution on our board agenda that we're organizing around. So really ask yourself these questions, or as you work with your friends and your supporters and your allies, ask yourself these questions to figure out what that issue is. The other thing to think of is, and a key question is, what are people saying about the issue? Someone might have already written in a letter to the editor of your local paper. The news media might have already covered something. You might be on social media in a local community group or a local group around your public schools, and you're already seeing what people are saying about the issue. It's important to see what they're saying, to see what that messaging is and sort of what they are focused on, because as you move forward on that issue, you want to make sure that you are using the right kind of talking points and the right kind of methods to get those people excited and activated for your cause. And finally, are they talking? Sometimes this happened very frequently when I was on the school board. I'd have parents contact me and they were the only parent to have ever contacted me about an issue, but at least it brought it to my attention. I might not have gotten, 20 emails about the issue, but it was a specific issue that actually impacted multiple campuses. And by that parent reaching out specifically, the school board was able to take action, or the district office was able to take action behind the scenes to help fix that issue. And so you want to see, is this something that people are actually talking about? And is it something they actually may be interested in organizing around? Christy, I don't know if you have any thoughts, from your perspective.
I don't think I have more than what you said, but I think the same thing is that getting involved in local communities to see what people are talking about, finding social media groups that are talking about things. That's one thing that helped me to hear that other parents had the same concerns as me and to be able to find those parents. So I think that if you start looking around, you're going to find people are talking about it somewhere that maybe you just haven't come across them yet. So that helped me a lot. Talking at school too, just trying to find people what they're concerned about at school, even just when you're on campus, talking to other parents what they're hearing. And you'll find there are going to be people that are talking to other parents across the community, and you can kind of start to hear what's happening that way too.
Great, thanks, Christy. So we've talked about finding your issue. The next step is you got to find your people. So if you have an issue that you're passionate about, something that you want to tackle, you got to figure out, who can work with you to push this issue forward. And so really this is about defining your network and figuring out the players on the board. And part of this is, figuring out from a community perspective, who will be with you, who the opposition will be, and sort of what are the other, active stakeholders in your community that could be involved in the issue. So the first thing I encourage you to think about is who is in your area. And this means geographic area. So some school districts are single city school districts, others are multi-cities, others are regional. So who is in your area? How big is your geographic area? For example, where we live, there's 150,000 plus people in the Chino Valley that the Chino Valley schools serve. And so that's 150,000 people potentially that might care about what's going on in the public schools. But that's just geographic. That's just people happen to live here and we happen to be their public schools. The second thing to think about is who is in your community. And community can be defined in a variety of ways. You might belong to local service clubs and organizations. The church that you attend might be involved in your chamber of commerce. You might be part of a volunteer organization. The groups that you volunteer with, at the school sites where your children attend school. That's sort of your community of who you're networked with, who's actively involved, civic leaders. And so your local city council, your planning commission, your parks and rec commissioners, there's a variety of people in sort of every local government, every local ecosystem that sort of help shape what happens in your community. And so you kind of want to step back and say, who are those people? Who are those organizations? And would they in any way align on this issue, or would they be interested in aligning on this issue because it impacts them in some way? And that leads into point number 3, which is who cares about your issue and why? Some issues may seemingly, to you at least, feel like they're just my issue and no one else is going to care. More often than not, you would probably find a bunch of other parents throughout your school district who also care about it. They might not just be as vocal about it as others are on different issues on the internet. And so it's important to figure out, who cares about your issue. And that's sort of one of the more powerful things with social media is people are very open about sharing opinions or sharing news sources. And through a lot of that, you can figure out, wait, these parents that their kids go to X school, my kids go to Y, but we still are feeling the same way. And so you can connect with those parents online and then end up moving that activity offline, once you've kind of created a coalition of individuals who are interested. Figuring out who would you organize. Some issues have a variety of stakeholders. So for example, there's some issues that impact staff members on campus, teachers, and parents. And so who would be a natural ally? The parents, the teachers, and the staff members on the campus. Some issues might lend themselves to particular subsets on a campus. And so oftentimes in our district, for example, there's an issue around athletics. Well, who else would be aligned with you? Other parents who have student athletes who might have a similar issue. And so it's just important, as you look around your ecosystem to figure out, who are you actually going to push to a school board meeting or push to it to actually reach out to school board members. Or let's say you want to do something like a public demonstration outside of the school district office. who are the people that are going to show up and hold the signs and be there to rally around your cause? And so this is where you start really thinking about, if I'm going to go out and do a direct action to try to get attention, who is standing right next to me on the sidewalk, rallying with me and trying to get people aware and excited about the issue. 5 is, who are your influencers? Every community has influencers. And one of the things that we love to share at Our Schools USA is we also think everybody is an influencer. I hear people all the time try to tell me they don't know anybody. And I have to believe, and I 100% believe, you definitely know a lot of people. Just in your day-to-day, you don't see these people all the time. Everybody gets into their routines. And so it's important to really step back and say, who you are, an influencer in your own right. You have your own network, your own sphere of people that you exert influence on. But in your community, there's also people that are very heavily involved. These might be, again, civic leaders, religious leaders, service organization leaders, business leaders. But there are people in your community that you probably often hear about, and they might also be interested in your issue. It's just not something that you see them, post about or, TikTok about every single day, because they have their own things that they're sort of, putting out there as their brand. But they may also care about what you care about. And so I think it's important to look on local social media, read your local newspaper, and just figure out, who those individuals are and how they may be helpful. Who are you targeting? I think this question with school boards, again, this is one of those ones that people might say, well, it's obvious, my school board. I want my school board to do something. Well, your city council might also have some skin in the game. Your planning commission, depending on what you want to have done, may also have something they can do about it. A lot of school districts now have partnerships with local government to give services to students. And so it's not just the school board. Additionally, and we'll be doing trainings on exactly what school boards do, because unless you've been on one, I do think it can be a little confusing what they're doing day to day. Some of the issues in school districts can be resolved by the district office. So the superintendent, their assistant superintendents, however your school district structured, there might be a staff member at the district office that can easily resolve your problem or talk to you to help resolve your problem versus you having to go to the school board to resolve the problem. And so it's really important to understand, who are you targeting? Are you trying to get the superintendent to do something who really is the CEO of the school district? Or is this a larger policy change or a larger directional change where you have to go to the school board, who's basically, if you're talking about a company, they're the board of directors. They have to make these major decisions that drive the direction of the district. And so it's really important to figure out who you're targeting. Or maybe you're just trying to, raise awareness about an issue throughout the community that impacts the schools. And so maybe you're targeting the media. Maybe you don't care that the school board's making a certain decision, but you want the news media to cover it so people start talking about, a certain issue or a certain perspective in public schools. And so it's really important to figure out, who are you trying to get a reaction or decision out of or some sort of movement from. And then finally, and we don't really like to put things as, this side or the other side, but here we are in public schools today in 2023. There is a this side and there is a that side. And so you need to figure out, who is on that other side. What are they saying? If you're to show up to a school board meeting and there's a resolution and it's controversial, when you walk in that room and you put in your comment card, who else is going to be sitting there? Is the who else going to be a couple hundred people? Is the who else going to be 2 people? Are, you bringing in that larger group? Sort of like who's being driven by the community? Are there influencers in your community that are basically telling people to show up to the school board meeting on a certain issue? And so what does that other side look like? And understanding what that other side looks like will help you to also craft your message. And I'll pause here for a moment and let Christy jump in because she has been doing a lot of this over the last couple of years.
I definitely think also people don't realize they're seeing a lot of people in their community every day. And one aspect I know we didn't hit on yet is like your youth activities. A lot of kids are in extracurriculars, and that's a chance that you're going to see parents across your district or from other schools. And that's one more way you're meeting more people from your community to learn what is going on in other sites. Maybe you're going to find overlapping concerns. I know, like, I've had concerns, and I think maybe it's just me, it's just my site as a parent. And even with my background in education in this district, sometimes I still think it's just me. And then it comes to find out, I start talking to other parents across the district, and it isn't just me. And so there is a larger issue that needs addressed. But you're constantly coming in contact with people that you have the chance to network with and create a relationship with. So just think about every day the people that you see in the city, taking your kids places, and connect with those people. And then I would reiterate, going and looking online. A lot of these people have formed groups, and then you can find more people that are interested in things that you're interested in working on. And even if you just, I have found just something simple as my own personal page posting something that's happening, and I will get a lot of feedback from people who follow me, and I didn't even know they cared about it. I didn't know they were worried. So I have also found a lot of people to join together with that way, as on the parent side.
Great. Thanks, Christy.
Mhm.
So we'll dig into a little more finding your people. I'm sure we're familiar with the who's who concept, but we're going to talk about the who's who of the local public school universe. And so first and foremost, your supporters. So who's going to be with you, rallying with you around an issue. So some questions you should ask yourself is, who are vocal supporters? Who can be your influencers? What are they doing? Are they doing anything right now? Is that you could capitalize off of, for example? Or maybe you just had a conversation with them and they'd be willing to go start doing something. And so you want to figure out, who are going to be the people with you going to the meeting, submitting a comment card, saying something, maybe vocal on social media, and what is their reach as of right now. And then also, do they occupy positions of power? I think it's very important to find allies in local government office as well as state and federal office. One thing that we've seen be very efficacious across the country is getting other members of local government to come to a school board meeting and support something. Or maybe you have a state representative who identifies with your issue, wants to come in and speak on your behalf. Some issues of a legal nature, you have a local district attorney's office or the state attorney general, they are also involved in public schools, and they may have something to say about what's going on in your school district. Similar, if you have a state superintendent of public instruction or another state official, whether they're elected or appointed, that runs public education in your state, there are issues they are actively working on and actively monitoring, and you just might happen to be organizing around one of those issues. And so don't just think to yourself, who that I see at the grocery store or at the schools or in youth activities or at church. You can think more globally about who else would care about what's happening in your public schools. And you would be surprised that there are some people that don't even live in your state that'd be willing to help you online on an issue because they just care about that issue. And they want to see that issue, survive one way or the other, in local public schools. Next, you need to look at opposition. In anything that you're doing, you need to see, who are the vocal opponents, who's on social media, who's organizing the other side of the issue. In public schools today, again, I wish this wasn't the environment, but it is. And so when we're teaching to the environment, there's usually a group on one side of an issue and they have a figurehead leader or leaders. And then there's a group on the other side, and there's a similar group of personalities leading that group. Who are those people? Why are they in charge? How did they get to be in charge? Are they influential, or are they just sort of in an echo chamber online, not really doing anything? Or are they driving the needle in your school district? These are all things that you need to figure out. What are they doing? What are they doing to get people mobilized? Something that we will also continually remind people of, and I know this is an environment where a lot of issues are emerging and you might just be frustrated or get mad about the issue, or get mad at the other people on the other side of the issue, use it as a learning moment. If they are being successful on an issue and you don't agree with what they're doing in terms of the issue, but you see they're being successful organizers, learn from what they're doing and do it better. Don't look at other people you don't agree with and just sort of say nothing they're doing is anything I want anything to do with. If they're being successful, if they're being heard, if they're moving the needle in your community, why is that happening? And it's really important to learn, because if they're being successful, you can learn from that, leverage that, and try to use that on the other side of the issue. So I see every single issue as a learning opportunity. And I see always looking at the opposition and saying, you know what, I don't agree. Maybe you even fundamentally don't agree, but why are they being successful? And you really need to figure out why that is, because otherwise that could stop your success because you're not using the same communication tools or leveraging the resources you should be leveraging. And then finally, does the opposition occupy positions of power? I know one of the major issues right now is we've had a huge turnover in school district boards in the last election cycle. And so now your school district board may not reflect how you feel about issues. So now they do occupy positions of power. How do you organize against that? When you are the resistance to what's happening on your school board, what does that look like versus maybe your school board is aligned with you politically or is aligned with you educationally on what you value in public education. Those are two different ways to organize. Those are two different ways to communicate. And so again, figuring that out is really important. Targets, who are you trying to convince? Who are the decision makers with the issue? And then you're going to have primary and secondary targets. And so, for example, you might have an issue where you realize that targeting the district office staff and getting your messaging in and emailing them is important, because then they're going to go to the board and talk about it. Okay, so your primary target's the board, but you have to go to your secondary target, the superintendent and his staff, to get that messaging up to the board. And so it's really important to realize that it's not just the 5, 7, 9 people that sit on your local school board. There's a variety of other people that are behind the scenes running the district day to day, and they exert a very high level of influence on the school board. Whether you think they do or not, they do. Because most school boards are not full-time. Only in major cities are school board members compensated in a way that they would be 40 hours a week, paying attention to everything that's happening. So they're very reliant on the district staff and the district leadership to help them prepare for board meetings and help them make decisions. And so don't overlook that. The media is also something that I think is not utilized, particularly with school district organizing. Your local paper is probably starving for news and starving for stories. And so if you pitch the news media a story about what's going to happen around a resolution or an issue, that's a photo op, it's a story, it's a Saturday paper for your local newspaper. And so I really endorse, reaching out to your local news media or your regional news media, because they're often looking for stories and interesting perspectives in public education. And finally, other stakeholders. Who else would care? There are some issues in different communities where religious leaders care, and they can be a very valuable resource, or local business leaders who are influential, who exert, influence in the community for a variety of reasons. They might come and speak on behalf of your issue. Are there other local elected officials? And so sort of looking at who are your local electeds, who are your state and federal electeds, would they or their staff come to a meeting to support you? And then see how the media is covering the issue. School boards have definitely gotten more attention the last basically 3 or 4 years due to the pandemic, but also now due to many of the culture war issues that are being discussed day to day. And so the media is often covering these issues a lot more than they used to. And so you can look probably regionally or throughout your state to see how are your major newspapers covering these issues, and what do they look for? What do they focus on? Are they focusing on parent stories, the larger issues, the national public schools environment? You can kind of glean through reading those articles what they're looking at. And finally, again, we will remind people, you do know people and you are an influencer. Again, I run into people all the time that tell me, I only know 3 or 4 people. There's no way you only know 3 or 4 people. I'm going to tell you right now, you are much more popular than you think. So, just reach out to people, even people you haven't talked to in 5 years that maybe you were at a school site with, and then your kids went to different school sites for middle school or high school. They remember you guys were in the thick of it together. And so don't think that you can't reach out to those people and say, hey, I haven't seen you. We used to work together all the time with our kids. I'm really passionate about this. I'd love your help on this. And the worst they're going to say is no. And getting a no is not bad, because you know what? You're going to contact the next person and you're probably going to get a yes or a maybe. And so we think yeses and maybes and nos are all wins, because at least you reached out to people. If you just sit at home on social media complaining about stuff, nothing is going to happen. And so it's just, you will feel better even if you're just reaching out to people and you get a little bit of rejection. I'm going to promise you will feel better that at least you did something and tried to move the needle on an issue. I don't know, Christy, if you have anything you want to jump in on here.
I just want to reiterate to look at your local reps. I think that was something, as a educator and a parent, I did not think about that much. And really, they all are paying attention to the school boards, especially now. So look at your entire state reps, all of them, because there might be a state senator in another area that's interested in your issue, and that's something that they're really passionate about helping districts with. Look at your city council. Some of us have a county board of ed. So look at your county board of ed. That's another source you might have. And you can look at the members who might have the same view as you do, and you can go to them for some support and assistance. Another thing you do, just call their office and ask. They always have people on staff there to answer phone calls, and you can just ask, I just want to know what the senator's position is on this issue I'm seeing at my local school or my local school board. So those staff members are there and they want to hear from their constituents. So you calling in, even if they tell you they disagree with you, well, then great, you know that's not a source for you. But don't discount the local leaders that you have and local representation, because they can be a really good source. And this is the kind of thing they want to help with.
Yeah, I think something to remember is you're never going to know if you don't ask. And so it's better to
Yes.
call up an office and ask for something, and you might be genuinely surprised. That's an issue they care about, or maybe they don't even know anything about the issue. And that's the first time that they have heard about it. Well, great. Now it's on their radar. And so again, even if you get a brush off or a no, those are successes. And, by the end of this, you're probably going to get tired of hearing us say that, but it's true. You never know if you don't ask.
And I want to reiterate, you also have the right to ask for a meeting. I think these are things that I always thought people didn't ask for or do with these representatives. And then I've watched people I disagreed with utilizing that, and they would get meetings and they would get sit downs with the superintendent. So ask for the meeting to voice your concerns, because you're much more likely to be listened to if you're requesting meetings, even if you have to ask more than once.
So Rolodexing yourself is important. So we're telling you to reach out to all these people. And so where do you start? And this can be a very overwhelming process. You probably have a list of people you're friends with on Facebook, people that you associate with on Instagram. You could probably open your phone and see all your contacts, maybe a printed paper list from throughout the years of, the PTA, the PTO. You might have contacts on LinkedIn. I mean, there's all these different places now that manage contacts. And so we'll give a couple quick tips of how do you Rolodex yourself. I know the Rolodex is a very old term, but, I'm still going to use it. How do you go through your contacts? First, scan your social media. So you can easily look at your friends list on Facebook. You can easily look at, who you're connected with on LinkedIn or TikTok or, Instagram. These are all social networks where they have a view where you can see who you follow, who you're friends with, who you associate with. And you can easily go through and scan it. And, as you, go through your food people and your fashion or whatever else you have on your Instagram, for example, you'll also see all the people And so, say, oh, Jane Smith, great. She lives here. Awesome. She's on my contact list now. So you want to go through all your social media and use that. The next step is go through your phone contacts. I know that, I was in my contacts the other day, and I had people in there from a way long time ago. I'm not going to say how old I am, but they've been in there for quite a while, phone over phone, rolling over. But some of those people, they still live here and they would be helpful. And so it wouldn't hurt to send them a text message or to give them a call and see if they're willing to help on a particular issue. You also want to go through all your contact lists for your schools and community groups. So many of us are involved in church, in local business communities, service organizations, youth sports. I mean, all of these things come with something great. A list of the kids, a list of the parents, a list of the people that are stakeholders and participants. And so, if you have those lists, just go back through, and I'm sure you've spent hours on end talking to different parents and people about different issues. Why not just test the waters with some of these people and see whether or not they're going to agree with you on an issue? And again, we talk about issue organizing. Not everything is a controversy. Some of the issues in your school district are just things that you think should be better. And so you should not be surprised that other parents might say, yeah, there's something we can improve here, and we agree with you. And so on things that are not controversial, but would be better for students and better for your public schools, you're going to find a lot of parents align with you and are willing to do something simple from their phone or send an email, but that will be helpful to you in terms of getting the result that you want. And again, more people than you think. So if you start going through these lists, you're probably going to remember people from 10, 15 years ago. And sometimes those people will surprise you. They'll be the people most involved in what you're doing. And so again, sit down, go through, see who make that list, and then just start contacting people, in whatever way you have contact information for those individuals. We'll also talk about supporters. And so, you are going to have this, list that you're going to create of people that or have known, your contacts. And then you're going to start contacting people and figuring out, who's with you, who isn't interested, or just people don't have time. And so, life is life. And so sometimes people want to be helpful and they just can't be. But once you identify from that larger list that you've created who your supporters are, you're going to divide your supporters into different buckets. And I always like to use the 3 bucket analogies when I talk about supporters. And so there's 3 buckets you're probably going to create once you figure out who's with you and who can help. One are your leaders. And so, if you're the one doing the phone calls and sort of kicking things off, that doesn't mean you have to be by yourself in leadership. You might inspire somebody else who wants to jump in and be just as active. You were just sort of, the spark that lit the fire in terms of the organizing. You'll have people that are in the behind the scenes bucket. There are some people that are terrified to say anything publicly. They are never going to go speak at a school board meeting. They are not going to stand on a corner with a sign. That's not who they are, but they will sit on social media and contact thousands of people. They will create your messaging. They will design stuff for you. There's so many people, that are very talented in different ways. Ask those people to do things behind the scenes, because you're going to need that behind the scenes work to help what's happening out front at a board meeting or a public action. And then finally, you'll have your base. And these are people who are not going to take a leadership role either, in person or, online, but they might show up to a meeting and sit there wearing a shirt or holding a sign, or, they're willing to share something on social media. And so your base are the people that you're repeatedly going back to and trying to get them to buy in and do small actions that are not as time intensive or commitment focused, but you still need those people behind you because that's your strength in numbers. And one thing that I will point out, and again, we are a nonpartisan organization, but I will say, just from what I've noticed, both sitting on a school board, but as well as, seeing organizing over the last 10 years in our political landscape across the US, one side is doing a much better job of getting people bought in and creating community. And that's really important. If you are asking people who have kids and jobs and all these commitments to come into a board meeting or to come to a meeting on the weekend or to really help you push something for a month or two around a major issue, or maybe even longer if it's just your school district is having a variety of problems, they have to want to be there. They have to like what's going on. It has to be fun in some way. They have to feel like something's happening and they're winning something and there's advances. Even if there's losses, that you guys are like in it together and there's some camaraderie. Like one-off asking people to do things over social media, like 1 month and then coming back 4 months later, you've lost the people that you found in month one because they have not kept engaged. And so engagement is really important to keep people organized and mobilized. Even if it's a text message or an email once a week of like, hey, this is an update on the issue. But I think more so text messaging people, calling people, trying to organize in person as much as possible. People feel very isolated. And that's something that we come across a lot, with our organization is I think people just feel like they're in silos. They go to work, they take care of their kids, but they're looking for opportunities to be active and to be social with people who care about what they care about. So you would be surprised how many people would show up and help and come to something in person because they just want to be around people who they identify with and who live in their community and share common goals and, want to come to a common purpose. So it's really important to make sure that, and again, I think that, and this is not supposed to be a political comment, but I do think groups more on the right do a much better job of this, of getting people to feel like they're a part of something bigger, but that's really important. And, when I've done grassroots organizing and when I worked for a national nonprofit, you would see the groups that were more successful, the people in those groups had more camaraderie. Even if they were acquaintances, there was just more camaraderie. They liked being with each other. It was more fun, even if the issue was like a controversial one or a lot was at stake. Just they felt better about it because the group they were with just had better buy-in. So at all times, even if your issue short-term, even if it's like literally you're building up a month or 2 weeks to a board meeting, there's one resolution, there's one decision, and then basically it's done. Make sure there's regular ways to connect on social media, via email, via text message. Take your wins and losses together. You will have losses, especially if you are in a school district where it's an uphill battle with your board. It's not all going to be wins. You're not going to walk out of every meeting high-fiving one another about how great the meeting went for you. You might be walking out and be dejected and have people that are really upset. So you need to be supportive. That's also really important, is that support network and making sure that, that's there for people, because some of these issues are very personal. And people want that support and they want to know that, we didn't have our success today, but hopefully we'll have our success at a future time. And then create and share information. That's really important to make it easy for people to create and share information and to ensure that, you're keeping people up to date. So great example is, you have a board meeting, something happens, you've communicated before the board meeting, hey, I hope you're going to show up, we're going to be there, we're going to do this. And then after the meeting, communicating, all right, what's the next steps? Or, hey, this is what happened at the board meeting. I want to give you an update. So these are all things that you can do. And the great thing about social media is there's like 7 or 8 different ways to do it. And so you communicate with people in a way that meets them where they're at. I don't know, Christy, if you have any perspective on this.
Yeah, I think that, first and foremost, you have to get your people to show up. So get them to the meetings. And, we were talking about identifying who would come and hold signs. But if you're not getting people there, the few that you do get will not be as likely to come back again. Like, I've attended meetings where I am going to go speak, and I was speaking on something COVID related, and I went on my own, and I did not know it, but the other side was the opposing view was very organized, and they had a lot of people there. And I was booed throughout the speech. I was yelled at. I left immediately because I didn't want to be leaving at the same time as everybody. I left immediately. I was yelled at and called names on my way to the car. So and I am someone who knows the school board and the school system very well and is pretty comfortable with it. But I can imagine somebody who's not would not want to return. So when I attend meetings, when I have a group of support, it just attending that meeting together will start giving you that sense of community, and it will help your cause to be further worked on. You'll gain more support. Just doing that together is a good starting point. I feel like the other thing I want to say is that I do think utilizing social media is great. I find you're going to get more support and more follow through with individual text messages or messages. So for sure, put your first message out with broadly with social media, if that is something you can organize on social media. But then if you want to really make sure you get people there, the best thing is to do individual messaging as much as you can. I know that's more difficult, but you're just more likely to get follow through. And it's critical to get a good showing, because I know, you can say as a board member, when one side has a lot of people and another has hardly any, even if more of the community agrees with the smaller group, that's not what the impression will be to the district. And you just can't fight that week after week after week. If the other side has a lot of people showing up continuously and you don't, that message to the whole district and the board will be that there are more people in the community that agree with this louder side, even if it's not the case. So get people there for sure.
Great. Thanks, Chrissy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've talked about finding your issue and finding your people and how to get those people engaged and to keep them going. But you also have to find your goals. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? If you think you're going to sort of get a coalition of the willing just to go in and generally be mad at the school board every meeting, yes, does that exist? But at some point, what are you there? Why are you there, and to what ends? What do you want out of your school board? And again, some of you are single issue organizing around resolutions, around one issue. Others are facing things that are coming up every month or, week by week. But either way, what is your goal? Because people will often ask you that you want to get involved is, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to get at? If I go, what do you hope the result's going to be? And so again, this is something where it might be obvious. So if there's a resolution, there's a yes vote and there's a no vote. And so it's very easy to say, like, we're yes on resolution X or we're no on resolution X. That's easy. But what if there's not a direct choice? What if it's not a yes or a no? What if it's we need this in the district as a general, premise? How do we want that to show up? So if we think, for example, that arts education is lacking in our school district, okay, great. We can go in and start talking about arts education, but what do you want as the outcome? Do you want a particular program? Is arts education bad in part of the school district in terms of maybe K-3 arts is great and then it drops off? Are you looking for more funding, more after school programs? And there's a variety of ways that you could kind of, slice and dice arts education. And so what is your exact goal? Because if you go in and you articulate a goal, you go in and articulate what you want from the school board or the district office or whomever the decision maker is around this piece of public education, it's a lot easier for that board, that person on a board, that decision maker to decide, yes, we can do this or no, and this is why. And some things are budgetary. That happens very frequently in public schools. Public school budgets are always sort of up and down and all around across the country, depending on where you live. But sometimes it's not even a budgetary issue. Sitting on a school board, I can give you perspective like, yeah, we deal with a lot of controversial stuff, sure. But that's probably 10% in a normal school board environment, not in a last 2 years environment of what you're dealing with. Otherwise, some of it's just the school district's been doing it this way for 25 years. Well, that's not a good reason to keep doing something or not doing something, but that's just the way we do it. So maybe you're going to go in and have a goal and say, we want this arts program in our schools. And you might initially hear, well, that's not the way we do it here. Well, then you come back and say, well, it is the way we should do it here. And this is how. And so, finding your goals also lets you figure out your strategies. So once you know what you want, how do you get there? So, start general, narrow it down. Figure out if your goal is to be laser focused. Again, we are in an environment with culture war issues. Some of them don't have an obvious end goal. It's just you want your board to, have a lens on those issues one way or another as things come before them. That you want them to know how you and, part of the community or even a majority of the community, it depends on the issue, feel about something. And maybe that's just the goal, is that they're aware that you as a parent or you as a community member or you as a teacher or sort of whatever your nexus to the public schools is, you as a taxpayer. I mean, one of the things that I think gets glossed over is everybody has an investment in public schools. I mean, whether or not you have children in the schools or don't currently have children in the schools, everybody has an investment. Public schools are so important to our local communities. They impact so many things. And so, it's important to figure out what is that exact goal, or is it just sort of a broad goal of wanting a board to have a view about something? So a couple questions you should ask yourself, what do you want? That's pretty simple. And sometimes what you want just isn't going to happen. So, we are in an environment with public schools where there are restrictions on certain funding. And so you might want to, do this, but there just isn't the money, but maybe there is some money to do part of what you want to do. So what do you want? And is it long-term or short-term? Again, in school board organizing, it could be a resolution. It could be a program, it could be a long-term thing. And so figure out, is this long-term or short-term? And that might also change your goals. Can you define a clear goal? So is there something that you can go in and say, this is what we want, this is the goal? So for example, I brought up, a little while ago in this training, we had an issue several years ago in our school district where parents wanted a second school opened in part of our community. Well, that was an obvious goal. We need the school open sooner. Our other school is overcrowded. Let's get the school open. That was very crystal clear. And so it was then on the board to say, we need to accelerate this and move this forward. So you might have an issue like that, where it's very clear our goal, or an issue like that, where there is a goal where you're look, we just need this, or we need this now, not later. And so it's much easier to sort of articulate, this is the goal. Can you think of the issue as having a goal? Will your goal shift your support? People are also, and this is something to remember, people might be with you on one issue and not with you on another. And so if you're organizing just a larger group to be for parents or for teachers or for the community to go and advocate on issues before the schools, you may have some people with you on the first 3 issues that you go advocate on. And then you might get to issue 4 and just that's not their cup of tea, or they just don't even agree with you because that's just a different issue. And that shouldn't be offensive to you. It should just be that is. People are very multifaceted and feel different ways about different things. And so, I saw that very commonly when I was on the school board, is I'd see some parents aligned on some things and then they would shift to something else. And I'd see some of those parents disappear. Why? They're not all going to agree on everything, and that's totally fine. And you might find the same thing with organizing. And so your goals might also change over time, and just be prepared for that. And, what might getting to your goal look like? So let's say you win, to use the term win, I'd hope that in public schools, we were thinking about everybody winning, but let's say that you want something and, you feel like you would win if you got this. What does that look like? What is the result? And so it's really important. And the hard question you need to ask yourself is there a goal you can organize around? Because again, let's say that you are going into the school board, whenever you have meetings, some districts are once a month or twice a month. Let's say you're once a month school board. If you're going in once a month and you're trying to ask for something, what is that? And are you going in every month and asking for it? Well, at some point, a board member or a staff member is well, what do they want? And so if you aren't able to say what it is that you want, then how do I know what to do? And so if it is an issue where you can clearly identify, I want this policy change, I want this in the schools, or I don't want this policy change, or I don't want this in the schools, again, it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to say it. Because the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a blank stare or a no, or you might get a yes. You never know. But it never hurts to come out and directly be clear about what your intentions are and be clear about what you want out of the school board or the school district or whoever the stakeholder is that you're trying to target and get to take some form of action. I don't know if Christy, if you have some thoughts on this.
No, I was recording a couple of questions we have in the chat. So
Great.
let me.
Thanks.
And we'll get to those at the end. Yes. I just think you want to be really clear about what your goal is. That's probably one of the most common things I see is I'm helping community members with emails or speeches, and I will get their speech and it's not really clear what they're asking for or what they want. I try to reiterate they should start saying what they're looking for and what the end result is they hope for, and end with that too. Be very deliberate and clear about what it is you hope to see change or happen. If you see a problem, don't just say this is bothering me. Think of some possible solutions too. So you want to make sure that is always easy to identify, and assume that people, sometimes there will be district people that aren't listening to everything. So saying it more than once I always do that. I always start and end emails, speeches to the boards, all of that. I would just be very clear with what it is you hope to achieve.
Great. Thanks, Christy. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about your people, we've talked about your issues, your goals. The next thing we're going to cover is finding your message. And this is very important because we all receive information in different ways. As board members, I sat on a board. I've also been involved in a bunch of organizations and sat on non-school boards. People learn different ways. And so you should see a school board meeting as you are a teacher at the podium and you are basically trying to give a lesson on something. And your school board member may have no background on what you're talking about. One thing that I think is really important to understand that unless you're in a major suburban school, major urban school district or a major suburban school district, the board members are not full-time. And one thing that people don't know is boards often don't have any staff. So the person or the people supporting the board are probably the superintendent and a handful of assistant or associate superintendents. Different school districts their bureaucracy is a different way, but they only have a couple people that are supporting them. They don't have a full-time staff member. It's not like your state senator or, a member of Congress where you're calling an office and you're going to get one of 5 to 7 people that support different things for that different elected official. Like you're getting the school board member probably. You're probably getting directly emailing or directly calling the school board member, and then they're probably directly asking the superintendent or someone that they know on staff of the school district and give them an answer or help you out. And so it's really important to understand that your messaging might be the only messaging they're getting. The second thing, and I hate to say this, but it's just the truth, and this happens across the country with different school board members from different political backgrounds, religious backgrounds, just backgrounds generally. Some school board members are very well prepared. They are reading everything. They are doing their research. They are, they don't want to waste the taxpayer dollar. Like they are on it, and so they have gotten their materials for their meetings. They have them annotated. They have questions. They're ready to go, and it's great. Even if you don't agree with their viewpoints, it's like, great, they're organized and they're ready to go for the meeting and they mean business. And you have others that I'm going to tell you right now, show up and have read nothing and have no idea what's going on, even on the things that are the day-to-day routine stuff with your district, your budget, hiring, firing, all these things that they have to make decisions on that happen all the time routinely in school board meetings. The millions of dollars that they spend on school boards and school districts across the country, they don't have any idea what's going on. So that's who you're talking to. You have a mix of people who may be totally kind of tuned out and people that are definitely dialed in. And so when you're going up there, like you may be the only information they get about something. They may not read, they might even read their emails. And I know it's probably disappointing to hear that your elected officials are not reading their emails, but that's just the reality of the state of play in elected politics. So you could be, or you and your, supporters, you and your group could be the only people they're hearing from getting any information. And so you want to make sure that you are covering the bases for the different people on the board and what they care about. And so one thing I always advocate is research your board members, research your superintendent, whoever your targets are, figure out who they are and how they might digest things, like what might be important to them. Like, sitting up on a dais, and we had a board of very different people with different backgrounds. I went through one changeover on the board. We all had very, very different backgrounds. I could tell some things, just people, I knew they learned a certain way. Like some people were visual, some people needed things repeated, others were more facts and figures people. You got to figure out like who your audience is and how you're speaking to them. So first and foremost, what's going to resonate and what do you say? What's the story? We have a lot of issues in school boards right now that are very emotional. People are really passionate about it. Great. What's your story? What is the general story? What's compelling? Why would I care? Why would anybody care about what you're saying? Whether it's the person sitting next to you at the board meeting, your neighbor as you go get groceries, or the person running the school board meeting. Why would they care? What's compelling? And good stories are compelling. There's interesting things that are happening and they make people care. They also have good characters. And I have characters in quotes because this is all happening in real life, but every story has characters. If there's an issue happening on a campus, there are a variety of different people that are involved in that issue. Who are they? How are you telling the story? How are you weaving them into what you're saying? Then you want to talk about why it's personal to you. Why are you impacted? Why are you there? Is there a personal challenge that you're facing? You have hard choices that you or your family are going to face as a result of the issue. And have you experienced a negative outcome? Like, do you have a personal story of something that's happened to you or your child or in your community, and you feel the school board needs to know that this happened? Like, that's personal, that's impactful, that's you. That's not you talking about some like abstract issue that like wouldn't resonate. That's your experience as a person. And that's very powerful. What you have to say and your personal experience with the school district or any local government is really important. And then after you talk about you and why it's important to you, why would it matter to them? So to the other person, the other you, like, why does it matter? Like, why should they be concerned? What choices will they have to make with this particular issue? What are the outcomes they might face in terms of the decision-making or the impacts on, the individual themselves? And then, what do you hear when you listen to others? I think one thing that's really overlooked in issue organizing is, and again, listen to what other people are saying, not just people that agree with you. Listen to what other people who don't agree with you are saying, because they might be saying things and you're like, look, I don't agree with a word coming out of your mouth, but the way you are saying it is just so powerful and so dynamic, and it's just drawing me in. That's important. Learn from that. How do you then tell your story the same way so that you're heard the same way? And finally, attention grabbers. Like, what do people want to share? We do live in a social media culture. We're all on social media. We all see what's popular. I'll be honest, like Christy and I use TikTok to communicate for our schools. We're sometimes confused about what takes off virally on TikTok. It's just one of those things. Like, I'm glad I'm not responsible for figuring out what goes viral on social media, but what are people covering? What do they care about? What is getting shared? And what about it is making it, get shared and passed around? What would the media cover? You might know your local media and sort of what gets them excited. So, what angle could you run, or what needs to happen at the board meeting for the local paper to cover it? 3 or 4 key talking points. I cannot emphasize enough that you cannot send people into a meeting. And some of you will be organizing with very good friends of yours or people that you've known for a long time that are strong acquaintances or have stronger ties, but you're likely going to meet a bunch of new people who don't know you and aren't part of your inner circle. And they're going to come and say, look, I want to help. I want to be here, but you got to tell me what to do. So having 3 or 4 key talking points is really important so that, let's say you're going to a board meeting. You should pass those out to everybody coming in and saying, hey, if you are going to public comment, thank you so much for coming and helping us. Here's some things we'd like you to say. Or, we've had people in the past, as I've been organizing when I worked at the national nonprofit, Christy's experienced the same thing in the school district where we live, is that people are like, hey, I'm here. What do I do? And you don't want to not have something for them to do. Otherwise, they're just going to sit there and feel like, why did I spend 3 hours of my evening? I was coming to do something, but you have to have something for people to do. And I'll pause for a second because, again, I was on one side of the dais for my school board experience. Christy's been on the other about having those talking points.
I think I kind of touched on it the slide before, but I think it's really important to make sure like you open with what you want from the school and what the concern is, and then you end with it to sort of bookend whatever you're speaking about. Because again, there are some board members that are going to listen really well and they only need to hear it once and they're tracking and they're staying with you. And then there are others in all districts too. I've seen them in mine, but I've been looking at a lot of school districts the last 6 months, and I see these kind of board members everywhere where they're not listening very well. So I think it's important that if you use the same phrase more than once, that's effective. Everyone also needs to hear things more than once. So I think it's okay to reiterate the same message more than one time in your speech and other people to do it too. I think that also is important. So again, just keeping consistent so that it's very clear what it is you want. I also think there's something powerful about more than one person asking for the same thing. The optics of that favor you. Media is going to say, oh, look at how many people came, and it was very obvious they all wanted the same thing, and you're more likely to get coverage on that. I think that there's something effective about that too. So you can coordinate what you're talking about to maybe have some slightly different details. Like one person might share some facts about something. And then if you have another speaker who does have a personal experience, those are always really powerful. I think that when someone's speaking from their heart and what they have experienced, like it's really hard for anyone to discredit what they're saying. So if you have somebody that's willing to speak about their personal experience with an issue, I would definitely try to foster that and help them and buddy up with them and get them to come if I were to pick somebody to speak, because those speeches tend to be most impactful in my opinion. I don't know about yours, Christina, sitting on the board.
Yeah, I think that those are most impactful. I think the other thing I can say, and this has been across issues when I've been on the board, but also having worked in advocacy around children's privacy and other issues over the years, when you don't give people something to say, so let's someone's going to come in and tell their personal story. They have like a minute they're going to share about what personally happened to them, but then you want them to tie that minute to the talking points. People can easily get off message because let's sort of set the scene here. There could be hundreds of people at a board meeting, and this person's the first time they've ever spoken, and they have their story. And it's 100 strangers, and people really don't like public speaking unless you're a total extrovert and it doesn't bother you at all. Most people have some aversion to public speaking, and you're like just kind of foisting this person to the podium, or however your setup is in your school district, and you're like, tell your deeply personal story, go. They tell that for a minute, but then what are they saying for the next minute or two? I mean, different districts have different policies around public comment, but you want to buddy it up. Like, here's your great personal story. Thank you so much for coming and sharing it. But here's what we want you to also say after. So once you end your story, and this is why 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever the talking points are, because people will also get off topic. And one thing that I really encourage as you are working with people is offer to help coach them, listen to them ahead of time, and get them to not go off topic. Because I have noticed that people generally, and this is something to appreciate about school boards, there's really nowhere else you can go besides a city council where you can get up and say whatever you want to say to that person, and they are stuck listening to you. You can't go to your state legislature and just walk on the floor and get right in your legislator's face and say, you know what, I don't like what you did, and go off on them like that. There's not a public forum for that. You can't walk into the governor's office in a state and just say, you know what, governor, whatever, I don't like this. They're not as publicly accessible. School boards and city councils and any sort of locally facing public commission, they're very accessible. And so people might go in and just be mad about life or other things, or things maybe that the school board has nothing to do with. And then all of a sudden their great personal story of man, this happened to me and my kid, and this was terrible. And then it's oh, some weird political theory had nothing to do with anything they just said. Well, then that also undermines what you're trying to do there. If that person then sort of goes off on a tangent, and that tangent sort of isn't the flavor of what you're trying to do. And so you really want to make sure that you are supporting people and empowering them to stay on message and tell their story. But most people are looking for some guidance on what to say. And so if you have that guidance, that's great. You also want consistency, because let's say this is an issue where board members don't have defined opinions. And a lot of what school boards do is I won't say benign, but like it's day-to-day business or things that come before them. So they might be walking in there just saying, I want to know what the public has to say about this at our meeting. And so you want to be consistent, because if we're hearing something, if you're a board member and you're hearing something again and again and again and again on an issue where it's like, oh, I didn't realize like doing this way. So let's use school drop off, for example. There's actually a lot of issues in many school districts about how that's oriented because of traffic concerns. Well, I might not know that a certain school site, the way that we're doing it is backing up a street and causing an hour worth of traffic, where if we redirected it this way, that's something that some school boards deal with all the time. Well, if you're all saying the same thing, then it's like, wow, all these parents every day, this is a mess. This is really messing up people getting to sports or whatever else. And so, keeping consistent, really can have some utility. So the next thing we'll talk about is your group, your school board meeting. So you've gotten all this great stuff together. You've organized people, your message, your issues, your goals, everybody's ready to go speak. What are you doing before you get there, and what are you doing when you get there? And this does not just apply to school boards. This applies to any public policy or government issue, or whoever you're trying to convince. Like these tips would apply. So what's next? First and foremost, have a game plan ahead of time. Like, what is happening the day of? Like, is there a phone tree or a text tree? How are you checking in on people? Like, did you guys coordinate t-shirts or signs, or is something happening out on the public sidewalk outside of the district office before you come in? Everything is planned. If you want the media to be there, they've been contacted. You're not scrambling the day of, because the day of you may be scrambling to text people and call people to make sure they show up when they said they'd show up. You want to have a list of who's committed. And so, if there's 25 people that said they would be there, use the rule of halves generously, that maybe half of those people will show up depending on when they committed. And so you're going to want to be able to follow up with those people and call them and text them, or, carrier pigeon, or however you're getting in contact with people the day of. You want to make sure you have that list readily available. It's the phone tree concept. You want to make sure that you have yourself and the other people helping you being able to go through your network and get people to definitely show up at the meeting or whatever the action is. Have 3 or 4 talking points on a flyer. You can easily do a 1/4 of a page flyer, just hand it out to people ahead of time or text it to people. The great thing about the internet now is there's all these cool apps like Canva, where you can design something really cute with 3 or 4 talking points, get a little JPEG, and just, text it to people before the meeting. Use a buddy system. Again, I can't emphasize enough how, just think about you yourself. You show up somewhere where you don't know anybody for the first time, whether it's like even like a social event, even a church event, and you don't know anybody. That is really intimidating. So imagine going to a public meeting and you don't know anybody. So use a buddy system. So have somebody outside the district office, like, if people are coming in to help you and they're there and they're with you on an issue, like you might have somebody come in who's also with you, and they're just sort of look like a deer in the headlights. Like, I'm here, I want to help. I heard about it on Facebook. Be ready to help that person and be a buddy. The other thing, and this is with contentious issues, unfortunately, this is just the environment we're in. You might want to have people walking people back to their car at night, making sure that, they can get back to their car. Sometimes students need to be buffered in meetings. And so you might have a big issue where students want to speak. Well, you might want to have enough people to sit around that group of students to make sure they're protected. I wish, again, this wasn't the case, but this does happen, at school districts across the country. So use a buddy system. Make sure someone is there to support other people as they come to the meeting, and people will also just feel more comfortable. Public speakers also sometimes want someone to go to the podium with them. And so you be willing to, if somebody were to show up at the meeting and be like, I want to speak, I really support you, I'm really scared to get up there, would you stand with me? Like, yeah, maybe you don't know the person, but again, what is it to you to stand there and make that person feel better and feel more empowered because you were just willing to stand by their side and let them know they're not up there alone for those 2 or 3 minutes they're going to be speaking. Get there early and know the system. Every school district is different, so we won't make any targeted comments about this, but your school district probably has a comment card system or a sign-up system or some electronic system or email submissions for public comment. Ask the district office what that system is, know when they open the boardroom, and sort of know how it happens in practice. So this again might be something that sounds like a ridiculous suggestion, but I don't think it is from my experience. Mm-hmm. Maybe just go to a board meeting and see what happens before you say anything. So if you've never been to a school board meeting or a city council meeting or whatever the meeting is, sit in the back and just sort of like see what unfolds, because it's kind of like community theater. Like you'll sort of see like, oh, like people are rushing in at 4 o'clock and grabbing 50 cards. And, so you kind of want to know what is going to happen. Like, are people rushing to get there and taking all the seats, or does nobody show up and there's 10 people? I mean, you don't know until you go. And every school district is different and every meeting is different, but at least you'll start to get an idea of how your meetings run. Many school districts now also put their meetings online, some live stream and some record them. So even if you sort of sat there and watched it online, you get some idea. You're not going to know until you go. Just like a city council meeting or anything else, you're never going to know sort of what that feels like until you've gone once and seen a whole meeting run through and sort of what happens operationally. Don't be afraid to show support. So there is nothing wrong with going and cheering and making noise or yelling things. I'm a big First Amendment person. I think that people have the right to do that. Difference between being civilly disobedient and being mean and disruptive. Those are two very different things. And so holding signs or dressing up, or I've seen all sorts of creative things happen as a board member, not just in my district, but in others, what the audience has done. Don't be afraid to be creative. Like, even if it might be borderline, like, okay, maybe someone thinks that this is going to offend them. It doesn't hurt to be creative, to have signs, to try to get your message out in alternate ways. It is different though when you are using profanities at people or crossing a line. But I think that we're all adults and we know when we're crossing the line, hopefully, and when we're not. And I always remind people that, and I would get a lot of flack on this on the board. I would say students are watching. No, they're not. Yes, they are. Students are watching, and a lot of families now will watch school board meetings together because they just want their kids to understand what's happening. And so think about, like, would you want, a second grader in your school district seeing what you're saying? Like, would you want them to, even if it's a complex issue, would you want to present yourself in a way that a second grader or an 11th grader, or even when a teacher that works in your schools, or your grandmother, like whomever, like, do you think about that when you go to the podium? Like, how are you presenting yourself? Because if you're presenting yourself in a way that is not palatable, at least a little bit, even if your message isn't what they want to hear, then there's really no reason for showing up. And so I think it's important to, be creative, show support, be loud, be there. But just also remember that, it is a school board meeting, and similar to a city council or any other meeting, like, these are local government meetings. And there are also people there that don't care about what you are there for, and they're there for other business. And so you just want to be respectful of that as well. And then finally, have a plan for what's next. So let's say you go into a meeting and the outcome of the meeting doesn't feel like it went your way, or there was a decision that was definitively a yes or a no. And then everybody's walking out of the meeting together, and maybe they're riding a high of like, this is great, we had a victory, or people just seem deflated. You got to have a what's next. So let's say you have what you feel to be a victory or a win. Maybe, you have something afterwards where you have some snacks and people like having some camaraderie and they feel good about it. But you should have something like, yeah, you know what, this was great, I'm glad we had success today, but we still have a long road to go. So we'll be in contact tomorrow with more information and an update. If it's a loss, same thing. You want to make sure people feel like, look, we're not done. Like, you don't want to ever walk out of anything where you're trying to get people excited and feel like, man, we lost. That sucked. All right. I guess nothing else to do. Well, yeah, there's always something else to do. Maybe there's another issue that you want to mobilize on. So you want to have something else for people to do to stay connected, because the worst thing is if you walk out of anything that you've been working on for a while, and this is in work and in life and in school boards, and then it's like, oh, well, we're just done. Like, that's just over. That's not a good feeling for people. And so just think about, if you were that person, what would you want to know is going to happen next? And so do have a what's next. And again, this can be something you communicate over social media or in person, but always have a what's next, so people know that there's another thing that they can do to help advance the ball forward, whether it's on this issue or another issue. Then you want to find your strategies. So I'm a big fan of bite-sized advocacy. You don't want to ask people to do major things they're not comfortable doing. And so not everybody is ready to jump in and speak at a school board meeting or hold a sign or, march down your main thoroughfare. Like, not everybody is there. And so you're going to have people that are barely to share, like clicking a link. And we all get emails every day and we don't click the link. So remember, getting someone just to click the link is a big barrier. So you want to give people things that it builds up their involvement to where they do become more involved. So you might want to ask somebody to click a link or to share a post or to sign a petition. Those are all low barriers to entry, but they're ways that you can get an email list and get contact info and get people sort of bought in. So the next time you ask them to do something else, they've already have that buy-in of, yeah, you know what, I signed that petition, or I shared that post, or, I was told to find 5 friends to get to do whatever. That was easy. I did it from home. I did it from my phone. I was in my car, I was on the soccer field. Great. Well, now maybe I want to do something else. And then maybe work those types of people up to attending a meeting. I mean, attending a meeting is not a small thing. We're all really, really busy, and meetings for school boards can be anywhere from an hour to 5 or 6 hours, depending on what's happening. So you're asking for a really big commitment from people. So some people are not going to dive right in, but they'll dive right into doing something on social media, or maybe they will help you do something behind the scenes because they can't come to the meeting. I'll let Christy speak to this, but the other thing you want to be careful of is bite-sized advocacy is important, and you don't ever want to be dismissive of what people can or can't do. I've seen very oftentimes in organizing where people have really high expectations of other people because they're hyper involved. You're the one leading it. You're spending hours a week on something, and then other people aren't doing that. And then you criticize those people, make them feel bad for those small things they did, which, they were helpful to you. And so you should always be appreciative and let them know that, hey, I really appreciate that. I saw that you shared it on Facebook. That was cool. Thank you for doing that. Or, I know you said you text 10 people. One of those people reached out to me. That was really helpful. Now, I understand that in the grand scheme of things, you're probably, if you're the one organizing everything, you've got 1,000 things going on. You're super busy, and maybe you want those people to do more, but they can't always do more. And so it's really important to appreciate that these bite-sized gestures of help are important, and don't ever be dismissive of them, because that's a really easy way to lose a volunteer, is when you tell that person what they did was meaningless. And and it doesn't mean telling them like, oh, that was meaningless, but if you brush it off and you don't say thank you, I think thank you is a really underutilized phrase. Like, you should always be thanking people for helping you, because that's why they're going to want to come back, because they feel like you appreciated, or your group appreciated what they did. I don't know, Christy, if you have some comments on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just think that you have to try to keep in mind that people are just so busy. And like, if you have parents, so if you're dealing with parents, they already have kids. And if both parents are working outside of the home, or even not outside of the home, like, life is very, very busy. And sometimes people are going through things you don't know about. So not to have a negative attitude towards small gestures. I think that if everybody did something small, a huge change is possible. So any actions are helpful. That's how I try to look at it. I think it's really important to, as somebody who's really active and organized, to try to make sure you check yourself and just try to remember to empathize with people and where they're at, and be appreciative, because anything they're doing is something else they're adding to their plate. So any kind of help they're willing to give is something that we want them to do, that we appreciate. I try to always make sure I'm telling them thank you. If something comes up for them, like an emergency or a family thing, I try to always be understanding about that, because if they have any guilt associated with talking to you, the odds are they're not going to keep coming back. I mean, and I've been on the other side of it too, where I am somebody that's I was completely overwhelmed for a few years. I had small children, I'm working outside the home, I was teaching, and, I had some activists give me a very hard time for not being more involved, and it made me want to avoid them completely and do nothing. So it's just take whatever they can give and be appreciative of that, because any action is helping you. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, and I do want to briefly comment though, because we have a little like sticky note on the side of the presentation here. Keep in mind, keyboard warriors. One thing that we have, as we've been working across the country the last couple months with different groups, is we commonly get a complaint, and it's also a slight that certain groups use against other groups in our vernacular now with online organizing and offline organizing, is people known as keyboard warriors. And I think that there's sort of 2 ways to look at that. So what does that mean? It's people that just sit on the internet and they're just like constantly messaging or, posting things. And there's a positive side of that, which is they're trying to build awareness. The negative of that, which we, a lot of the groups we're working with keep, saying, how do we get around this, is when people just want to sit on the internet and complain. And do nothing else but complain. They're not sharing things for the purpose of trying to get someone to do something or to be active. It's just we're there, we're in kind of our own echo chamber and we're mad about something. And so we're just going to sit there, we're all going to complain. And like 40,000 comments later on the same thread, we're all just more mad than we were when we started. And that's why we say, and you see a lot of our social and we talk, don't get mad, get organized. We understand that a lot of people that are coming to us are mad about stuff in their community. And yeah, you should be mad. But the next step should be like, what can I do to change it? Not just like sitting there and complaining. Because if you actually start doing something, you will feel better. Even if the result is not changing, it's always better to like start taking actions. And so again, coming back to bite-sized advocacy, if you have people that you're like, great, they spend hours of their day on the internet just complaining, I could just get them to do something else on the internet, make little requests and try to get those people to do that. Because if they're already there, like they might be more willing to do something that's internet related than, to do something that is, coming to a school board meeting. But, we appreciate that. This is a big organizing issue across the country, is that a lot of people who are upset about issues don't often want to take the step of like, let's fix the issue or let's figure out what we can do next. And so, I think having a variety of options for people is sort of the best thing we can advise to get those people to do a little something that will help you advance your cause. Then we have an action plan timeline. So some of you are dealing with things that are going to come up instantaneously on an agenda. You got to jump in and compress this. Others of you are movement building and trying to form an organization of parents and community members to go to the school board meetings, on a regular basis. So, we're going to share all this after, the presentation, and we'll be taking questions in a few minutes as our presentation wraps up. But start small to build your organization. So collecting contact info, starting to send messages out to people, start having routine communications, whether it's an email once a week or a message on social media, setting up an in-person meeting after a couple of weeks, having action alerts and reminders. So giving people things to do, like, call the school board or email the school board, or, contact another local elected official who has some sort of nexus to what you're trying to do. You want to meet with people individually. I think that we oftentimes rely on social media and think that that's connection is sticky. Nothing replaces in person, getting coffee with somebody. And a lot of people, again, like do feel alienated in their day-to-day lives. Like reaching out to get coffee with someone, like it's a big deal because people don't do it as much as they should. And I think that, again, I really feel that people are actively wanting you to reach out to them, like they want to be engaged. And so asking someone to come to a meeting or to get a coffee or, whatever you want to do to meet up with people, people like that. That makes them feel special, that, you want to talk to them and get their opinion and get them involved. You want to make specific asks. So as you're building this up, and once people are like coming to a meeting or meeting individually or subscribing to whatever your email list or however you're communicating, then start telling people directly things that you want them to do. And then finally, work people up to a big action. So this could be going to a board meeting. This could be coming to an event that you're planning in a park. It could be, whatever that big action is. Like it's up to you to define that. But then you work those people into being involved in this community, being involved in this movement, and you get them to come to that big action and show up when you need them to show up. The cool thing is there's a lot of tools to help you organize. We're going to do a training specifically on all the free tools that are available for organizing. But there's calendaring tools like Asana. Canva has a free version where you can, put together all these cool flyers and like cool social media posts to make things look cute and fun and branded. Google Drive, has free offerings like spreadsheets and documents that you can share. A lot of school board organizing groups are setting up Gmail accounts like Our Local Public Schools at gmail.com, and then using that for a listserv to email out people and to keep in contact with people. And then finally, we are on Zoom. So, we have no reason to, push Zoom. We could have been on Teams or anything else, but we're on Zoom. But that's also a great way if people just can't meet in person. People are busy. A lot of people are working. A lot of us live in communities where people commute. So Zoom might just be the best way you're going to get 10 people together to organize around an issue. And finally, we'll cover specific tactics, and then we will go to questions. I see Christy keep letting people in the room as well as writing down questions, and so we'll get to those in just a second. A couple of tactics that we want to put in your toolkit, just so that you are aware of things that you can ask people to do and strategies. And again, this was a very overarching kind of like surface level training. And so we have other training that'll really dig into this stuff, how to create templates, how to really dial down and organize. But things that you can do, email campaigns. So getting people to email your targets. I'm just going to say the school board for right now. So getting people to email them, having actual template emails, they can cut and paste and send to a board member, providing them the board member's information. Online petitions, change.org and a variety of other platforms allow for online petitions. And so if you want to petition around a certain issue, it's really easy to set one up for free and then make that shareable so other people will sign it. Social media, all social media is basically free. And so it's really easy to set up a Facebook page or an Instagram account and just start posting from there. Facebook, the meta universe of Facebook and Instagram makes it really easy because you can just cross post. And so things you put on Instagram can directly feed to your Facebook page to make it easier for you. Public speaking, I think, is one of the most efficacious things that you can do, is to, either go in and speak, or if someone can't make it, reading a speech from them, but making sure that, you are providing public speaking opportunities, public speaking trainings, giving people talking points is really important. Media coverage, again, local newspapers are looking for what? Surprise local news. And so actually writing an email and saying this is going to be happening on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, whenever your board meeting is, and kind of setting the table for them. They might then be like, great, we have something to write about and add to the paper this week. Attendance and noise. You need to get numbers there. You got to get people doing creative things. I love when people are creative, even, sitting on the other side of the dais. We definitely had some meetings over the last couple of years where people were very creative. Now, maybe I didn't necessarily agree with their perspective, but they were actually really creative. And so instead of me just looking at it and saying, why are they doing and why are they doing that? I was like, that was actually a pretty good idea. Like that was an attention grabber. And so, kind of mentally taking notes on what those attention grabbers are and how you can leverage those for your own cause. And then finally, and most importantly, I think, is have prep materials for all your mediums. You don't want to ask other people to create content. If you can just give people a JPEG to post and the message you want posted, or the email you want sent, or if someone just doesn't even want to write a speech, like here is a basic 30-second thing we want you to go say at the board meeting for the sake of consistency and messaging. Makes it so much easier for people to participate. So you want the barriers to entry for participation to be so low that nobody would say no to you. And again, like we said, people are going to say no, and that's okay, but try to make those barriers as low as possible. And with that, I think we have wrapped up what we have to go over today. And so, Christy, I will turn it over to you as you are DJing the questions.
Okay, so the first question is for you, Christina, and they're asking, what do you say as a school board member who sat up there and listened to people and got emails? What is your best advice for effectively communicating with your school board? What makes the biggest impression to the school board?
So I think a couple of things, and I'll kind of share my learning style. I actually am hard of hearing. And so I tend to really focus on people when they're speaking. And so that was one of the mediums that worked the best for me. I think when you tell a personal story, like why you're there, it's important. For me, when I heard people say, my child experienced this and I'm trying to share why that's important or what the negative impacts were on my family, I thought that, was very, very effective. I think speaking in generalities is not effective. I also have had colleagues on my board as well as other school boards across California and across the country. There's associations and other things you can belong to. Personal stories are also impactful. For me, I'm a lawyer. So when I heard facts about things, for me, I'm like facts and law. One of my colleagues was a police officer. He was the exact same way. So I think kind of knowing where your board members are coming from a personal perspective. I had other board members who were more, I would say, spiritual. And so when people came in and addressed things from a spiritual perspective, I could just tell that they were listening better than when someone came in and droned on 10 different facts. I thought the 10 facts were awesome. I could just tell looking on either side of me that it just wasn't landing. And so it's important to figure out like what makes your school board members listen, what kind of people they are. I think also remembering that they're people. Like you may really disagree with them on things, but they're still people. They have their own lives and their own personalities. And so don't look at them monolithically like you are anti this. And so I just like shut out. Again, school board issues and controversy, the majority of what school boards are doing is day-to-day running of the district, which is very important. You don't want someone just to never listen to you again because you were so caustic when you came in to talk about something. And I think that's important. And we're doing a public speaking training, in April. It's important to understand that like you can be passionate and that will come across like you really care. There's a difference between passion and then unwarranted aggression necessarily. And so I think that that's also important is, people love passion. People love to see people that are involved. I personally love it when people came in, even if they were angry with me, but they were just like, I was excited people were just there and involved in local government. And I might be, after the school boards, the last 2 years, one of the only school board members or former school board members that feels that way. But at least people were engaged and they cared about government. And coming from like a civic engagement nonprofit in my former life, like that was just to me like, great, people are here now and they actually care and they're paying attention to public schools. So I think my best advice is personal stories and then figure out what kind of learner your school board member is and what do they care about.
Great. Okay, the next question is, what do I do when so many issues are coming up at my school board and I'm getting overwhelmed? So I have misinformation being spread, maybe some policies being passed. And if I'm getting overwhelmed, what's the best thing for me to focus on?
So I would suggest making a list. I actually think writing things down is therapeutic. I think a lot of people do because it's, everything is kind of racing in your head and then it's down on paper in front of you. And we get this question a lot because some school districts, it seems like every other day something insane is happening. And so it can be really overwhelming and sort of your head is turning this way and that way, just trying to keep ahead. Make a list of all the things you think are issues or things that concern you. And then maybe like circle one or two that you're like, these to me and my values and what I care about as a person or a family, these are the two. And then maybe that's what you narrow in on because I'm going to tell you, it can be very overwhelming to try to stay on top of every single issue because there are so many in some school districts. Hopefully some of you live in school districts where maybe it's just, single issues every once in a while. That can be a little more comforting, probably not for you because you care about that issue. But you're only going to survive. You can only pay attention to so many things. So I would just suggest like picking, the one or two things that you really are passionate about and focusing your energy there. Otherwise, you can end up spreading yourself thin and not being able to work with other people and organize and get results and move the dial on anything just because you're too spread out.
Yeah, I would add a note too here personally that I think that in some of these districts where there is a lot going on, you're going to get a lot of noisemakers attending meetings. And sometimes we can get bogged down in looking at those community members who are really saying hateful things, maybe. And I'm in a lot of groups that talk about this. So I think that it's important to make sure we're focusing on like the actions that our boards are taking and things that our board members are saying, and not get bogged down by these extra community members who are maybe saying or doing things that are hateful or harmful. I mean, be upset with them and call them out, but try to focus on what actions your board is taking. So things that are actions that directly impact the students in your district. I'd focus on that first.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next question is, what pointers do you have to get people excited and motivated to help? I know we've talked about some of things already. And that was one of the questions though, is that I think this person says they have issues getting people to follow through.
I think that, and I say this sort of with a little bit of humor, but snacks. I've done a lot of organizing. I was an organizer in college. I went work for a national organization and the power of pizza. I don't know what it is about free pizza and free food, but people will show up. And so, it's funny, but not funny. You want to make some of this social. People care about something. And if you think you're coming to this really politically laden, aggressive meeting, like you might not want to show up because you're like, wow, or am I going to get there? And these people are just going to be, I don't know. It's easier when it's like, hey, we're going to talk about X issue and have some pizza. Something about the pizza. And I've seen this across the country, organizing on different issues all across the political spectrum. Just make it more of like a community event. Something that's like a low barrier to entry with like cupcakes or cookies or whatever it is. Like, just make it seem more approachable. I also think that when you are planning events, try to find like a host committee. And this is one of our initial trainings. And so we have a whole slate of trainings. We'll do one on event organizing and house parties. But you want to put together, if you're going to have like your initial kind of kickoff or whatever, you're going to have a meeting about something, try to get a host committee together of at least maybe 2 or 3 other people who are in it with you. They're going to be there, and then have them also help reach out and get people to come there. And you might, when you begin organizing, be asking people for favors, in the sense of like, you might be calling people and saying, look, you really have to be there on Thursday. Like, I don't even necessarily, you're my best friend. I don't really, maybe even don't care that you care about this. Can you just please come? Because we just need to have numbers there so we can start building. And so you might be calling in some personal favors and getting people to come. But I think starting with the host committee and then making the event seem a little bit social, like they get to meet other parents or other community members, is probably much better in this brand of organizing around school boards than maybe, outside of the school board context, because this is not just political activists. These are parents, these are community members, these are people that passionately care about their children and other people's children. So I think the tone that you set is really important to get people to want to be involved and want to work with you.
I agree. I think that's a good point you made too about having your go-to people. So finding your people you can call on if you just need to get people there at the beginning. I think it's especially when you'll use them and need to utilize them. Okay, the next question we have is, what if I am just starting off on social media? What's your advice to how to start to bridge over into creating groups? And what's the best platform to start on?
So I have probably my opinions on this. Christy probably has hers. I think we probably agree on
Similar
social network that we aren't as excited about. Showing our age a little bit. So I think that right now, just sort of what your purpose is, Facebook is just sort of like, I kind of think of it as a clubhouse. You need to have kind of something where you post everything and people can comment and go get information, and you post photos, and like it's accessible from a variety of perspectives. So for example, if you're going to share a flyer that you want disseminated, like people can easily download, the JPEG or the PNG file and then share it on their own. So I think having a Facebook group is important. I'm sort of leading into Christy making a comment about Facebook groups in just a moment, whether they're open or closed. And then Instagram. And again, I'm mentioning both of these because you can cross post, but I think if you're going to get your message out, a lot of people are scrolling through stories on Instagram and scrolling through posts on Instagram. And so you got to be where people are at. I also think you need to look at the age of the people in your community that are involved. School districts have, students that are involved, they have younger parents, they have older parents, grandparents. I mean, your group of who you are targeting and messaging could be age 13 to 93. And so, where are those people? Older people tend to be on Facebook. Much younger people tend to be on TikTok. There's kind of a middle with Instagram. And so look at who you're trying to work with and see what they already use, and then use those tools. The other thing you can do once you get on social media, to form a group, at least, I'm assuming a lot of people on this are on social media, is start following people in your community that are influencers or government officials. So county supervisors, elected officials, service groups, most local schools now have their own social, PTAs, PTOs have their own social. So you can get on your community and just start following like people that you think would be relevant. And then some of those people will follow you back and you'll get suggestions. But, as you get on social, that's what I would suggest, is just starting to follow those local groups. And then, your following will naturally grow, as you're working with people. But Christy, I know you have a opinion about open versus closed groups.
Yeah, so I find that it is important to make sure that you have something that is open in public, or people cannot find you. I personally, and I've seen it too, a closed Facebook group is great for discussion and privacy, but I wouldn't make it so the group is totally unfindable. because people have to be able to find you. Also, and then having the Instagram that's totally public, you can get your message out there more easily. People can look at it, anyone can look at it. And if you are not public anywhere, I find that you're limiting the amount of people that know what's happening. Like, for example, I made a few shareable posts during the last election cycle. I did not have a public page. This is my personal page. And just me sharing a few public posts about the local school board election, a handful of local people found me and they didn't even know where to go or how to become involved. And I wish I had done that sooner, we could have had some more people helping our cause that we needed. And now I have these people who help the most with what we're doing, and didn't even find them till the election. So people will get on and search hashtags and find you, so I think it's important that something is public, and then there can be a private page also, so that there's a little more safe space to discuss issues and share opinions. But I would make everything findable so that the community can find you even and know you exist. I also think if you have nothing right now in your community, I know I've been talking to some activists in other states who don't have a group. They can't find anything locally for their local school board, no parent group. And so she's just been posting on her own social media page. And that's, I think, a good way to start getting your feet wet, so to speak, and kind of see who responds to what you post. And then as that grows and you see an interest growing, or you feel more comfortable, then I would make like a public page, and then you can direct people from your own personal page to that public page. And you'll see, just by doing the things Christina was saying too, following local people, they'll follow you back when they see you're posting about local things. Following influencers that are talking about the issues that you care about, they too sometimes will follow you back. So that I think is important. Again, I'd like, the one thing I would take away is you need something totally public, and then having like a semi-private group for that discussion purpose is also effective together. I know it's a lot, but I think that's the most effective way to find your community.
And, we work in 19 different states right now, and we are getting emails every day about, is there some sort of group like in my area? And, we sometimes are doing, and the rest of our team is kind of doing deep cuts research, and then we find a group. Well, if we had to take that much time to find the group, then no one's finding your group. And people are not going to take more than a little bit of time to go in the search bar on whatever social network to find you. So again, it's important, if you don't want to be organizing out in public, sometimes there's a reason for privacy, might be a surprise element to what you're doing, but something should be public so people can easily find you. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to organize. And, the funny thing about social media is that it's sort of like someone's walking on a public street and just has like, on their shirt, like, I agree with this or I don't. Which is great, because if you're just going to walk around your neighborhood, you'd never know how people feel about things. So take advantage of that like people are putting out signals on social and looking for things on social that have an affinity with them. And so that at least makes it a little bit easier. We have time for one more question. If we don't get to anything today, we will try to address it over social media, but I know we are coming up on time.
This last question, I think we have already answered it actually, and it was where to start if my community is mid culture wars.
So there's a couple things, and I'll kind of do a plug for Our Schools USA, since that's why we are here today. So we actually network with groups across the country. So we have partner organizations that we actually have formal partnerships with that are doing amazing work in different states and local school districts. We have a network of organizations that are pre-existing across the country that have their own local parent groups. And then we have groups that are branded under the Our Schools USA banner that there was no group in their community. And so we help them to stand up the group, meaning that, we kind of like worked with them and workshop with them, like setting up social media, how do they get started, brainstorming around who to contact. And so some of the, services we provide, I should say, the support we provide is helping people basically do the things that we talked about today. Like, how do they find their people? Like, we walk them through that, like, what their issues, we talk about, how they can narrow down issues. And so that's a lot of support that we provide. If you sort of don't know where to start, like, please feel free to send us an email. I'm team@ourschoolsusa.org. Christy's info@ourschoolsusa.org. Christy is in charge of all of our partnerships and outreach. And so if you want to drop Christy a line, we're always happy to set up a Zoom or a phone call. If you need some help to stand up a group or you want to bounce some ideas off of us, like that's what we're here for. Or, we also have, students that volunteer with us that are helping identify groups across the country that we are reaching out to currently that are newer groups. And so we might have found a group in your community that maybe is just brand new and you don't know about yet. So I definitely, would suggest, reaching out to us. We're happy to be of help. That's why we're here. But if you're going to start somewhere, I think the first thing to do is to think about, what the issue is, and then use your friends and your colleagues and the parents at your school. I mean, a lot of people. I really, and again, we're probably going to be so redundant with this with all our trainings, but more people than you think like, why not bounce your ideas and what you want to do off some people and, it's very easy to, start a conversation and say, hey, this is happening in our public schools. How do you feel about it? And then let them just drop in their opinion. And if their opinion doesn't align with yours, there's an easy out, like, oh, okay, and then change the subject and get away from that subject if it's not something that you align on. But you might meet someone that says, what, like they say something and you're like, yeah, I feel the same way. And that conversation, starts them working with you. I mean, there's a lot of school districts across the country where, the story of the characters involved in the organization was a conversation, or walking out of a school board meeting and meeting people they'd never known and deciding that they're going to get organized for the next meeting. Like all of this has been very organic. And so again, like just having those initial conversations, reaching out to people, if you have, a relationship with any of your local leaders in your community. And by leaders, I mean religious, service, elected, business. I mean, there's just so many educational leaders in your community. Like reach out to someone you trust or and just get their opinion. Like, hey, these issues, these cultural issues are coming, before our public schools. There's probably one cultural issue that's probably top of mind in a given district at a given time. Just ask people how they feel about it or what they think should be done. I mean, again, there's no risk in asking. Like the only adverse thing that's going to happen is someone's going to disagree with you or say no. Nothing terrible is going to happen thereafter. So I always encourage people, like, use other people as a litmus test. Use them as a sounding board, see how people feel about something, and then you'll get a much better idea of who your allies will be around a certain issue. And, if you do feel like, I am on an island by myself, you have two new friends named Christy and Christina on the internet who you can reach out to.
Yes.
And we're happy to help you guys out. Well, I want to thank everybody.
Reach out.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry to talk over you, Christy.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, great. Well, I really appreciate everybody joining us today. I hope we answered all of your questions. Again, you can always drop us a line via email or on our social. This training will go up live on our website. We're going to edit it a little bit for time purposes, but this will go up on our website. And we're also going to have some social media clips that go out with little pieces of this so that if you have something out of this that you really want to revisit or refocus on, it'll be a more digestible little bite-sized piece. But again, I'm Christina Gagne, the former school board member.
I'm Christy Hurst, the former teacher and current public school parent.
And we are so happy that you guys joined us this evening. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.